Hello! And welcome to episode 2 of this season of What We Read! Woo!
Hooray!
If you missed episode 1, that will be linked down below, as well as the playlist where you can find all of those videos.
And this is our attempt to sort of spice things up in our second year of kind of vlogging together, in which case we shall begin.
Alright, so my first section is going to be all of the fantasy that I need to talk about in this video. First we have Fury Born by Claire Legrand.
Oh yes.
This is a book about two young women separated by centuries, both of whom have the power to save or destroy the world.
Ooh.
One is Riel, and she is gifted with the abilities of 7 different elements, and so she has to endure 7 trials to prove that she is the prophesied Sun Queen, who is meant to be light and salvation. And the other is Eliana, who is a bounty hunter, but she's working for the Empire, but she ends up teaming up with the rebels when her mother gets kidnapped and she needs to find a way to save her. And I have very complicated feelings about this book because for the first 150 pages or so, I was kind of struggling with it. I didn't quite love it as much as everyone else did, but things slowly come together as the story goes on, and eventually I was like, wait, I need to know what happens next. So I will warn you guys that this is a very slow burn one at the beginning, and it is hard if you only like one of the perspectives, or if you like one more than the other, which was the case for me. I liked Riel's perspective a lot, and Eliana was a little harder for me to get into. But it is a very fascinating world and very fascinating magic system, and I'm very curious to see where this one is going, especially after how it ends. The next fantasy book is a lighter fantasy actually, and it's called Bruja Born, and it's by Zoraida Cordova. It is the second in the Brooklyn Brujas series. This one is about one of the other sisters in the Mortis family, Lula, and she is suffering the after effects of what happened in book 1, Labyrinth Lost. Of course, she doesn't quite count on being in this major accident at the beginning of this one, and she ends up teaming up with her sisters in order to cast the spell in order to keep her ex, who she still loves, alive. Only everything doesn't go quite according to plan, and shenanigans ensue, because that's what happens when you do magic, because magic always has a price.
Ah yes, doesn't it always?
It is insanely fun. I went into this one with no expectations whatsoever, and I actually quite liked it. I liked it more than the first one. I thought that Lula was a fun character to follow, and I felt for her when she was going through all these different things. And I think that this book would actually make a great movie, because so much happens in it, and you're just on the edge of your seat for most of the time because you're trying to figure out how they're gonna stay one step ahead of the problems that Lula's little magic spell there has caused. So it was really fun. I'm looking forward to the next one. I'm kind of hoping it'll be 4 books instead of 3. I can't tell you who the other character I want to be a main character is, but
because spoilers,
I would definitely want that. So there's that. And then the last fantasy book I have to talk about is The Bird and the Blade by Megan Bannon. Also another fantasy I have complicated feelings about. It is basically about this slave girl named Jinghua, and she finds her life intertwined with the prince who she's basically a slave for, or enslaved by, I guess. Actually, she's enslaved by his father, let's be specific, but the prince is obviously
inherits that kind of thing.
It's based on an opera that I'd never heard of before, Turandot, or Turandot. I don't remember how to pronounce it. Hopefully I'm pronouncing it right. Yeah, so in this book, Jinghua is, struggling because she wants to be free and she wants to go home, but then she's also kind of feeling this debt, a life debt to the prince, which eventually turns into feelings for the prince. And at the same time, this prince is determined to rebuild his own Khanet. That's the term, Khanet, because that was the era this is set in.
Can it really? Sorry, it's right there.
And in order to do so, he has to do this thing where he has to answer 3 riddles correctly to win the hand of the princess, who is the daughter of the Great Khan. I'm not even explaining this very well, but let me Khanet, there you go, thank you. I was not very invested in the story while I was reading it, which is kind of sad. I finished it, so I guess there was still something drawing me into it, maybe the world and the details and the culture, because that was really interesting. And the pieces of literature that were also sprinkled throughout. But the story itself and the characters, I was kind of I don't know. And the way it ends, I have feelings about that. I'm not gonna say how it ends, obviously, because that's a spoiler, but I have feelings about that, and they're feelings.
So mixed bag then?
Yeah, it's a mixed bag, but I think it's leaning more towards the side of the spectrum, which is quite unfortunate because I was rather looking forward to it. So.
Well.
All right, that was the first section.
Alrighty. Thanks to, again, we are on our second bookish new year of vlogging about stuff, with the hallmark being the Book Expo, which jolted me to finally start reading my review books again. Starting with these three middle grade titles that I really feel very good about. So I'm going to start with Snared, Escape from the Above. It's a story about, I want to say Wily Snare, kind of like Wily Kid or Wily Cat.
That's kind of amazing though.
I know, Wily Snare, that's his name. He grows up thinking he's the ugliest little hobgoblin ever, but is basically the trapsmith for Carrion Tomb, which houses great hordes of treasure.
Oh.
And every day or every other day, knights and adventurers and warriors try to enter and you know, kind of plumb its depths, only to be like massacred horribly by the trapsmith's inventions.
I want to be that guy's friend.
He's amazing. He has a sister, a hobgoblin sister named Rovika, who isn't as smart as him, but is also an orphan, and so they've sort of been looking out for her. And this is what made me like really like halfway through. I was like, really, this is gonna make me sob on the subway. Rovika watches out for Wily. Wily watches out for Rovika, but Rovika, because she's an orphan and so is Wily, is only good for one thing, which is knife throwing. And she has two really sharp knives that she can throw really well. And since they're the only ones that she can rely on apart from Wily, she has named them Mum and Pops.
Aww.
At that moment, I'm like, why is this giving me feelings? So things change when a bunch of knights actually get past him.
Uh-oh.
And he sort of helps them out. He has no idea why, just a little bit. And then they reveal his destiny to him. So I recommend this. It has all of the hallmarks of a really cute, you know, middle grade adventure. It's got everything: magic, adventure, destiny, prophecies, all of that good stuff. And at the center, an unassuming trapsmith with a greater destiny than he thought.
Absolutely.
So that's why I recommend Snare. I also recommend A Stitch in Time.
Such a pretty cover.
I know, which is it's I was expecting something kind of like surreal or magical or realistically magical. I thought it was too, but it's actually a very poignant snapshot of a little girl's life. Her name is Donut. She loves.
We can be friends.
We can totally be friends, except for the part that she loves taxidermy.
Okay,
Yes.
I revoke my friendship.
I know it doesn't play a huge part. This isn't about a little taxidermy. It's just a part of her and of her quirkiness. She loves to adventure. She has friends in the village. She has an old kind of boat that she inherited from her father who had passed away in the war. It is 1920. It is 1920s, and her biggest problem is that her aunts are moving to Boston, where she can finally get an opportunity and be a proper young lady.
Oh,
which,
no.
Yeah, and so I was, and it really feels like a snapshot. I think it would be served better if it were done the way a Studio Ghibli or like one of those old Japanese kind of world-class series. I don't know what they're called, but they did like the Dog of Flanders and a Little Princess, Peter Pan. That entire Japanese studio did like a whole series, and this could have been one of those, only shorter.
Okay.
Because it's just so poignant, and the way it ends too is just so abrupt. But you get it, like hopefully you do. I mean, I like happy endings.
This title makes sense then.
I know, it really does. It's just
Stitch
a stitch in time. And it really, oh yeah, I only got that until now. Yeah.
I'm good for something.
I mean, I understood it on like an esoteric level, but I'm like, oh, that's what the title's all about. It really is a stitch in time. So I recommend that for a good coming of age tale, because she really does have to grow up in this, even if she doesn't want to.
Hard.
And then finally Bob. Which is out now. I saw it at the bookstore the other day. So the book is told from two points of view. The first being a little girl who goes back to Australia. She hasn't been in 5 years. And the second point of view is from the creature that she finds in her closet, who upon her instructions the last time she was there, stayed.
No.
And his name is Bob. So Livy finds Bob in her closet from her childhood, and she doesn't remember anything about him.
Okay.
But he remembers everything for her. What's amazing about this book is that if you look at just Livy's perspective and then you just read her chapters, it almost looks like Bob isn't maybe real. Maybe it's just a way for her to cope with whatever tragedies that maybe have happened in her childhood.
Okay.
They aren't too heavy, they aren't too heavy-handed here. But then you go to Bob and he's such a well fleshed out character with his own mind and apparently with his own lore. And it's one of those magical tales. And there's a lot of acclaim for Wendy Mass and Rebecca Stead. pretty much almost everywhere if you would want to Google them, and they deserve it. They do. And for them to have teamed up, I don't know if one of them wrote Bob and the other wrote Olivia, or they wrote them both or whatever, but just when they finally get to the end, this is a huge spoiler, by the way. But Bob with his, you know, short greenish creature dressed in a chicken suit, yes, I know, like that got me already. I'm like, oh, I'm reading this. When they finally get to the climax of the story and they figure out, so what is the mystery behind Bob, it just becomes really, really poignant and beautiful, and then super surreal and magical. Again, another Studio Ghibli story. You know, only Bob is snarkier than Totoro. Maybe snarkier. But he has his own adventures too, and he has his own thing. And so obviously when it ended, and I had, again, sobbing on the subway. This is why I read middle grade, apparently. A really good middle grade. I know, that's my gauge. If I'm like tearing on the subway and just like, oh, this is beautiful, then I know that's definitely been a good read. Versus, meh, finished it in like an hour and then that was fine, and then it didn't really change my life. So I would recommend it to anybody who wants to try something different. It's not your average middle grade tale, so I highly suggest it.
The next section that I need to talk about are, again, contemporary books, because I read a lot of them. First we have Little Do We Know by Tamara Ireland Stone. This is the story of two best friends, and it's told in alternate perspectives. There's Hannah, who is having a crisis of faith, and there's Emery, who is having a crisis of love, I want to say. And they're ex-best friends now because that something happened between them and they said some really terrible things to each other, and they both don't know how to find their way back to their original friendship. But when Hannah finds Emery's boyfriend Luke in his car passed out, she kind of ties their fates together again, and so the three of them kind of have to make sense of that incident as well as everything that's gone on in the past. And I was not expecting this one to be quite as heavy as it was, but it isn't a bad thing by any means. Like, sometimes you just need those stories as well because they can be cathartic, or they can be very eye-opening if they're told well. And Tamara Ireland Stone is really an author who knows how to write such complicated situations. I really like this one, even though I was also, you know, it took me some time to get into the characters, like in each of their perspectives. Like, I wasn't particularly invested until maybe 50 pages in or so, but it's really good, and it ends on a really strong note as well. Next we have The Paris Wedding by Charlotte Nash, and this is the story of Rachel, who gets invited to her ex's wedding. It's an all expenses paid trip to Paris for this wedding. And yeah, things kind of go from there, and it's the kind of premise where you really have to like suspend your disbelief, I guess, because obviously it's not likely to happen to any normal person. Although I do know a few people who might actually do that. But it was actually surprisingly good because it didn't just focus on the romance, although it was definitely like heavy on that. It also focused on how I keep saying Raquel because her name is spelled with like an A before the E. It's focused on how Rachel is basically dealing with her mom's death and the fact that she now feels like she needs to get a jump start on her future and her love life, and all of these emotions like are boiling up in her. It's funny because like parts of this remind me of Bridges in Madison County, which is a very interesting comparison to draw, but there are definitely things about it that I was like, that seems oddly familiar. It was okay. I don't necessarily think it was a new favorite or that I would probably remember it for very long after this video, but it was a decent read. Next we have one of my favorite books of 2018, and I've said this a lot in like the last two videos, but it's true. Join the bandwagon. This is The Kiss Quotient by Helen Huang, and it is so freaking good. It is a story of Stella Lane, who she basically works with She basically works with algorithms for a living. Like, she uses them to predict user behavior, and that's her job, and she earns a shit ton of cash doing that. But she likes having things in control and set in a certain way because she has Asperger's. But the one thing that she doesn't think she has very much experience in is dating and sex and all of that. So she decides to educate herself and hires an escort to give her lessons. Cue in said escort named Michael, and he is in that business because he's trying to pay medical bills for his family. And their relationship, literally from the first moment they meet, you already know that there's gonna be chemistry between them, and it just grows and grows with every page, and I love that. But what I also loved about this story is that it's also about the things that they're both individually dealing with. Stella has her own insecurities, Michael has his own problems, and they both have to come to terms with that on their own. And obviously it's a romance, so you can kind of guess where it ends for them, but also just watching them interact with each other, meet the other people in each other's lives, it was so entertaining, so funny, it was so sweet, and I'm so excited because she's doing 2 more companion novels about other members of Michael's family who I love. I'm so excited. So this is really good. If you want like an adult contemporary romance, then definitely check this out. It is a bit steamy, according to my friend Hannah. To me, like it's just the right amount of steamy, I guess, because I've read a lot of those books lately. But yeah, definitely check this one out. Then we have another one of my favorite books of 2018. Do you sense a trend here?
I sense a little bit of a trend. There's some trendage.
Let me just make sure that this is the only one left. Yes. Another one of my favorite books of 2018 is Save the Date by Morgan Matson. This is the story of Charlie Grant and her entire family as they navigate all the shenanigans that ensue over a 3-day wedding weekend for her older sister. Let me just tell you that this would translate perfectly into a rom-com because the sheer amount of shenanigans that ensue,
just the worst thing that can, I mean, she reacts
I'm so glad we already had our wedding because God. I feel like I would have been a nervous wreck after everything that happens in this
I'm pretty sure that if everything in this thing happened at my way, I would have just like,
laying down on the floor.
I would have just okay, everybody go home now. We're good. Like, we'll just do it in the corner and then that's it.
Okay, bye. But yeah, it's all about that, but also it's about Charlie coming to terms with changes and also learning that maybe she shouldn't keep throwing her own rose-tinted perspective onto everything and just see the truth of people or things. And it's surprisingly, like, for a 3-day like story, a lot happens enough to like cause an emotional shift in Charlie herself, and I think that was really impressive. So Morgan does the signature thing where she manages to make her story compulsively readable and so much fun, but also give you like characters you really love and relationships you care about and feelings, lots of feelings. I really enjoyed this. Plus, as a bonus, she has 2 special editions out. There's one with Barnes & Noble and one with Target, and all of the bonus content is amazing. I'm just gonna point that out now, so definitely go and get yourself a copy if you haven't already. And that's the end of that section.
Right, so I mentioned in the previous video that I was getting into the Kushiel series. I am, knee deep in that now with the second trilogy, starting with Kushiel's Cheyenne, then Kushiel's Justice, and then Kushiel's Mercy. It's set several years after the first trilogy in, again, this kind of fictional world where France is populated by these descendants of angels, and they're very sex positive, and they're very artsy, and they just love life and living, and are envied by the world for the beauty that they both possess and can create. At this point in time, we see a lot of the favorites from the previous series, so no spoilers here. I know take very pivotal positions, if not absolutely, but it centers on a completely different character from the main characters of the first trilogy.
Okay.
But it is heavily steeped in the consequences of all of the insanity that happened in the first 3 books. So the first 3 books are actually a very good, both emotional, plot, character setup for everything that happened in this next 3. And now that I'm on my second pass, it's just so artsy. And I mentioned in the previous video that the Kushiel series is just, it's so well written. The words are so beautiful. The plot is amazing. The characters are so lovable and beloved to me and to everybody who's read the series, that the only way that I can kind of put this forward is, if you like the first 3, you might like this better. Is my thing. And again,
that's high praise.
And I will say this though, if in the first book it was all about how can one woman who was born to yield find the strength to save that which she loves,
okay,
right? Here it is, how can and this is, I mean, well on the nose, this is a love story from start to finish. How can somebody so scarred and perhaps incapable of loving find all of the love that he's ever hoped and wanted?
Why you go do that? Now I'm gonna want to read it.
And fights for it. Oh my goodness. I can't even. I thought Phaedra and Jocelyn were already an epic love story, and they are. Nothing takes away from that, but I feel Jacqueline Carey was like, oh, so you like Phaedra and Jocelyn, huh? Let me slide this pair up and see how you feel about that. And I can't. Like, it's just, I can't. There's no way. And to see how the characters from the first book actually build up. Well, you know, the ones that survive anyway. And then,
hence why I have not continued.
And then, for the ones to build, I thought, what a great way to round it up. So I highly recommend the first 6 books. Anyway, I can't just, yeah.
He has a lot of feelings.
Too many.
Okay, the last section is a section that you probably are not going to see very often from me, and that's science fiction. First, we have A Wrinkle in Time by Madeline L'Engle. I finally read it! Macky has read this and enjoyed it. Rachel from Hello Italian has read it and enjoyed it. It's basically the story of Meg and her brother Charles Wallace and their friend Calvin, and they travel through a wrinkle in time to save Meg and Charles Wallace's father. But in order to do so, they also have to battle the forces of evil. I will say that if I had read this as a kid, a lot of it would have gone over my head. Because reading it as an adult, I'm like, whoa, that's intense.
It is. It's so deep.
I really like the themes that run through the story. That's probably my favorite part of it, because they're so, thematically, there's so much to like just grab at. But also I just like the fact that it is basically just 2 kids trying to save their dad. That's really all that it is.
It's a girl kicking ass and taking names.
Exactly. It was fun. It was so quick. Like, I was so surprised I finished it so fast, but also I shouldn't have been, because it's really not that long. I love Charles Wallace. I love Meg. And I really enjoyed it. There's
you know who else loves Meg? Anyway.
There's just
Sorry.
There's this level of both like whimsy and reality woven into this one, which I think is what makes it so accessible even now, years after it first came out. I think that's the part that makes it so interesting. So I was definitely glad to read this one. I was definitely glad to read this one is what I was trying to say, not it. I don't know who I'm referring to as it.
Say it again.
I was definitely glad that I finally got a chance to read this one. I finally read a classic, guys. It's been so long. And now we've come to the portion of this video where I'll spend the next, I don't know how long, talking about 2 books. I reread Warcross by Marie Lu. You guys already know that in 2017 I read and loved and became obsessed with this book. It is the story of
and cosplayed.
Yeah, it's the story of
as the book. No, I'm kidding. As Emeka.
Yeah, totally as the book. It's the story of Emeka Chen.
No, I'm kidding.
She's a bounty hunter living in New York, and she's basically just trying to make ends meet, and in a fit of desperation, she ends up hacking into an opening ceremony game for Warcross, which is this insanely popular worldwide phenomenon that overlays virtual reality with reality. Overlays virtual reality onto reality is what I wanted to say. And it also is a competition between teams, and you know, you could win acclaim, you could get famous just playing Warcross. Emeka gets hired by the CEO of Warcross, Hideo Tanaka, in order to investigate a potential glitch in the game and to figure out if someone is behind it. But as Emeka digs deeper and deeper, she starts finding out other things are going on, and it just becomes this insane ride. And I just loved it as much as I did the first time. It was still so much fun. I adore Emeka, I loved Hideo, I love the Phoenix Riders. I have developed a very specific obsation for their captain, Asher Wing. I don't know how I missed that, like the first few times I read it, but you know, I freaking love him. I also love the rest of the team, Hemi and Roshan and Ren. And it's just such a good story. It's so well crafted. The whole video game world is so fun. The plot is so interesting. The characters are great. Oh, it was just so good. I still 10 out of 10 would recommend this book. Also would want to see it as an anime, so if anybody's gonna do that, hit me up. But also, and the last book I'm going to talk about is Wildcard by Marie Lu, which is the sequel to Warcross. And let me tell you, if I thought Warcross was amazing, which I do, this book was like so flipping good. Like, it's even better than the first one, and I didn't think that was going to be possible. It obviously actually picks up right where the first one left off, and it happens over a very quick amount of time. In Warcross, there's like a sort of like a month or so like between certain events, and that's fine. But in this one, it's like, it's just the span of, I think, about a little over a week. Holy crap, it's so good. Like, I didn't know where she was gonna take the story until she was there, and then I was like, it all made sense at that moment, and I'm like, aha, right. And then another thing happened, I was like, wait, no, I thought it was no, wait, what? That's literally my reaction to this entire book. Like, I have been internally screaming over it. I have also been actually screaming over it.
And asking me to read it so that she can scream loudly at me.
It's just so good. I just admire the fact that Marie Lu, much like I said about another book in the first What We Read video, she just took what she created with Warcross and just made it bigger and ran with it. And she's like, oh, you thought that was it? No, drops this. It was so good. I'm so impressed. I'm so excited about this sequel. You guys definitely need to grab it when it's out. And if you haven't read Warcross yet, if you haven't read Warcross yet, please do, because I love that book so much. And so does Macky, and so does my sister, and so does pretty much everyone that I've made read that book. So I'm gonna call that a win. So those are all the books that we have to talk about for this episode of What We Read. Another episode will be coming up shortly, I hope. And we'll see you guys soon. If you're interested in finding out more about any of these books, do let us know. We're happy to answer questions anytime. And also to tell us what you've been reading, because we would love to know. Alright, till next time.